Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Opposite of Cheating podcast. We have a very special episode today. We are actually, David and I are both here, as you can see, if you're watching this together. And we've brought back Greer Murphy from episode 10, guest Greer Murphy, to be our host today because we are celebrating the first anniversary of our book. It came out in March of 2025. And so we thought it'd be kind of fun to have Greer, who is a close colleague and friend, and as I said, previous guest on the podcast, come and be a guest host and interview David and I. So thank you, Greer.
Thank you, Tricia. Delighted to be here with you and to be turning the tables just a little bit. Um,
Be
so,
kind.
no promises?
No
No,
promises.
no, comma, promises. I
Well, you'll
will.
be respectful though, right? Yeah.
And responsible
Yes.
and trustworthy and courageous. You see where I'm going with the fundamental values.
Yes.
Um, that being said, without further ado, it is truly a delight to be with you this morning. And I thought that we could begin by asking you both that question that you asked so many of your guests up to this point. What are your earliest memories of learning about or encountering academic integrity?
Go ahead, David.
Well, the first time I encountered academic integrity as something other than background noise, maybe, was I was teaching at Middlebury College back in the 1900s, and my office was across the hall from a guy named Gus Jordan. Those of us who read the literature will recognize his name as one of my early co-authors. And he was doing this work before I was. And like I said, he was across the hall from me, and I was at that point doing computer models of decisions. And we were chatting in the doorway, as one does. And he's describing this really interesting work he's doing on moral decisions in the context of academic integrity. And
Mm.
I said, there's been probably not been a whole lot of experimental work done on that topic. I bet we could just have a cottage industry replicating survey results with little experiments. And we looked at each other and we realized that this would be a great sideline for both of us.
Mm.
Little did we know that 25 years later, I would still be doing this, and Gus would be retired and hanging out with his grandkids. I had the opportunity to see him when I gave a talk at Middlebury just last month.
Mm.
And it was really nice to come full circle and tell him thanks for dragging me into this.
What a wonderful moment. Tricia, what about you?
Yeah, so I have someone who dragged me into this, Patrick Drynan, one of the not founding members of the International Center for Academic Integrity, but one of the very early members. He was the college dean of arts and science at University of San Diego when I was a PhD student. And he called my dean and said, I need you to send me a student, an education PhD student to help me with this conference I've got coming. And so my dean sent me, and I went to meet with Pat, and it happened to be at that time the Center for Academic Integrity's conference he was going to be hosting in 2003 at 2003, 23 years ago at USD. And we talked about that. I said I was going to help him find. And then he said, "What are you doing your dissertation on?" And I said, "I'm actually in a bit of a crisis right now. I'm not sure." And he said, "Why don't you do it on academic integrity?" And I said, "Because I've never heard this phrase before now." And this was in fall of 2002.
Yeah.
And so he was just so passionate about it. He came from University of Virginia, where there was an honor code, and he had been working with ICI for a number of years, probably 10 years at that point. And so I had just never met another faculty member that seemed that passionate about a
Mm.
topic.
Mhm.
And he was a political scientist, not an education person. But so I relented. I said, "Okay, I give up. I'll do an independent." I said, "What if I do an independent study with you this fall? I'll go into the literature, see if there's anything interesting there for me as a leadership, org theory, higher ed person." And he said, "Great." And that independent study paper turned into our first journal article together, and
Mm.
my only Journal of Higher Education article. So I give him all the credit for getting me published in the Journal of Higher Education, and for launching my career, my specialization.
Also wonderful. I have memories before I met either of you actually of reading your piece with Patrick, Tricia. So full circles all over the
Yep,
place
full circles.
and really, really great. All right. So another question, as a former writing instructor myself, that I knew I wanted to ask you both with respect to this book is that you've each published quite a lot together, separately, different texts, different audiences. What surprised you the most about the process of writing The Opposite of Cheating in particular?
Well, I mean, the biggest surprise was happened after we wrote it the first time, well, because we submitted it literally the same month that GPT-2 came out.
Oof.
And so that was sort of a, gotcha, get to write it again.
Plot twist.
Yeah,
Mm.
plot
Yeah.
twist. So exactly.
We
So
introduce a new character to our book.
yeah, talk about Deus Ex Machina, right?
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I think that this was the first time for me I was really liberated to write the way I talk.
Mm,
Um, and almost every other form I write in, whether it be journal articles or whether it be student feedback or it's introductions to things or book chapters, there's a form and you have to follow it.
mhm,
But the
mhm,
OU Press really set us free to make it our voices, and that for me was a challenge and a delight, and I certainly had never done it before.
mm.
My surprise was that we got it done. David and I might have procrastinated just a little bit on getting started. And we were going through a lot at the time, both professionally and personally. And so at some point, we were just like, we just gotta go. And I said, let's just write.
Mm,
You know,
mhm,
you've got that block, not really a block, but just if I can't sit down and dedicate certain amount of time and be very sure of what I want to say, I can't start.
mhm,
And so I said to
mhm,
David, let's just write. He took on 3 chapters, I took on 3 chapters, something like that. And we just did it. And we wrote the first draft very quickly, and then started exchanging drafts because we wanted to make it one voice.
mhm.
And then ChatGPT came out and we went back and rewrote it. But one of the biggest compliments I think I've received is from Adriana Kizar, not to drop names. But
But that's a name to drop.
she said I couldn't tell when I was reading the book who wrote that part. And
Mhm,
that to me was a great compliment because David and I worked really hard on blending together. Our voices aren't so different when, but they are. And so blending that together was the fact that we able to do that successfully kind of surprised me, but kind of not.
mhm, mhm. And that really stands out to me as a reader of the book, having seen it in a couple of iterations on its way to publication, how natural it sounds. It really does sound like, in the best possible way, I think a conversation with each of you or both of you,
Yes, and
rather than
that
an invented kind of genre fiction formalized in the academic style type of work.
Yes. And that reminds me when I introduced Greer, I did say episode 10, and she was introduced at that point as one of the reviewers of the book. So that's why she's talking about different iterations when she read different iterations. So thank you again, Greer, for doing that.
Yes, of course, my pleasure. So since the book was published, David, you spoke to this a little bit with the GPT tie-in, but what surprised you the most about what's happened for you at each since publication? Response to, reception of the book, conversations it's opened up for you that maybe you were part of previously or not in quite the same way, connected you to constituents or folks you hadn't been as connected to prior. Any direction you want to take that in.
Well, there's a lot of things. The first one is that I said to Tricia at one point, is this a book without an audience?
Mm,
Because we're writing about academic integrity to people who already know about academic integrity, and we're writing about teaching and learning for people who already know about teaching and learning.
Mm,
And what I failed to recognize is how little people talk to each other. And that we what we've done is what we set out to do, which is to make this about the work that other people have been doing and platform all this fantastic work in teaching and learning and in academic integrity so that it can be of use to people as we start to move into this radical change.
mhm, mhm,
And I've really happy to be wrong. I was just looking at our little spreadsheet. Between us, between book clubs and invitations, Tricia and I have been to over 100 campuses, virtually mostly.
Hmm.
That's unheard of. And as an academic, as a faculty member, you write a journal article, and if 80 people cite it over 10 years, it's a massive success.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you never get to communicate about your work with other people unless they're criticizing it. So to hear that people have actually found our work useful
Yeah.
is is such a great thing to have in your career, and it's been such an unbelievable bit of good fortune that we've had that opportunity.
Mm.
Yeah, this is my fifth book, but my first one with this kind of reception. And so I guess I'm going to credit David for that and Jim Lang because he allowed us to write, in a style that's approachable or and teaches people how to write in the style that's approachable to folks and timing. I mean, you know, Gen AI came out, people were just getting over the stress of the pandemic and the impact it had on academic integrity, the negative impacts it had on academic integrity. And then this thing came along that was
Mhm.
challenging everybody again. And so I hear over and over again from people, it's like, it's funny because I'm not phrasing anything different in there than I've phrased since my first book in 2008 in terms of this is a teaching and learning problem, not a conduct problem. And
Sure.
yet it's reaching more people this time. And people are saying, oh my gosh, I love your framing. I love your approach. Just us saying students are human, just so expect that they might cheat and they're going to be tempted to take these opportunities to use an agent to do a quiz. It doesn't mean they're horrible people. It just means they're human. And people really just appreciate that grounding and a practical, it's compassionate yet realistic approach.
Hmm. Hmm. Certainly. And bringing together, as you both spoke to, conversations that are happening and have been ongoing for quite a while, but perhaps not synthesized or
Yeah.
brought into contact with each other in
Hmm.
quite the same way. And that
Yeah.
certainly stood out to me about the work from my earliest encounter with it. Speaking of the wider universe of the opposite of cheating, we are on episode 50, as you noted, of
Mhm.
the podcast. And I was wondering if you could each share a highlight in terms of your podcast outreach conversation, or maybe two or three, just what stood out to you about engaging in the conversation at that
Mhm.
level around your ideas.
Well, I'm amazed that it went as well as it did. It's hard to imagine anyone listening to me for an hour who's not getting graded. Um, so it's been amazing. For me, I've talked to a number of folks who, like me, have a background in psychology, and some folks who I've admired for a long time as well. Guy Curtis, Phil Newton, just
Mm-hmm.
really remarkable work. Jason Lodge, unbelievable talent and creativity on the research side. And so for me, the opportunity to talk to folks who I'd never met and whose work I admire and who come from it from the same place I do. Because that's one thing that makes Trisha's and my collaboration powerful is that we come to this from different places.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have somebody to nerd out with about that stuff is really nice.
Yep.
Yes, and we should mention, I think, that Jason Lodge, who's just aired episode 49, also just got a very prestigious teaching award in Australia. So the 2025 Australian Award for University Teaching Recipients. So
Wow.
definitely,
Wow.
if you haven't listened to episode 49 yet, you should, because he's not just a great researcher, but obviously a great teacher too. Um, I I too am pleasantly surprised at how many people say yes to us when we ask them. I my LinkedIn network had exploded since artificial intelligence came along or LLMs came along. And I just reach out to people and say, "Hey, do you want to be on the podcast?" They're like, "Okay." So that's been amazing to talk to so many people from so many different backgrounds and really bringing to life some of the things we talk about in the book. And I have been told by people who listen to the podcast that it is so helpful because they hear people expressing the same struggles that they're experiencing,
Mm.
who might have found the same solutions or are offering a solution or an idea that they hadn't thought of. So there's a real community there. It's not a big community, in terms of number of listens compared to some podcasts. I don't think we're going to be winning the Grammy or whatever Oscar, whatever it was the podcast awards. But it's been really enjoyable to talk to so many amazing people. And when times are tough and you are able to connect with people who are doing good work despite tough times, it's motivating.
Finding that
Agreed.
community, like you say, and the solidarity of being in the work together and
Yeah.
moving along.
Regardless of whether we're in Egypt or Australia or Canada, United
Mhm.
States or England, we do, if you're listening to this, we do need some guests from Latin America. So that is one region and that we haven't, one of the regions we haven't explored too much yet.
I'm thinking there's some folks we could call.
I think so.
So, at any rate, my next question ties into your backgrounds. And yes, your backgrounds are, of course, different, but I think of you both not only as mentors, colleagues, friends, but really, really skilled educators that may manifest in slightly different professional ways, but educators nonetheless. And I'll say one of the things, again, that I've loved about this book since it was in manuscript form is that while it's geared towards readers who are past their own student days, perhaps in terms of main audience, faculty, administrator types, it's so accessible to students.
Mm.
So the peer educator team at UC Santa Cruz has read the first three chapters. They're looking forward to meeting you, David, when you come to campus. And it's really connected with them. I also note that there's just such a student-centeredness and a compassionate approach to the student perspective that shines through on nearly every page. So I'd love it if you could each speak to how working with students shaped your approach to this book.
And that's
In
such a
every
great,
possible way.
yeah, and that's such a great thing to hear. That is now my best compliment I've ever received.
Ah, well,
Yeah, David and I mean, I don't speak for David, but David's done research on academic integrity with students, right? That
oh,
he was well known for that at his last institution, and had worked with the Honor Council, and I've worked with peer educators and students since 2008 when I started our after education program.
yeah.
That has really formed my perspective on these are humans who've made a mistake. We're an educational institution. Isn't it our job to help students learn from their mistakes? If it was I say to faculty all the time, if this was an academic mistake, like they made an error in a concept, you'd
Uh,
think, oh, maybe I didn't teach it well, or maybe they didn't study it well, or maybe they just had a brain fart at the moment that they were answering that. But you wouldn't go, oh my God, I can't believe the student made that mistake. Right? And
mhm,
yet, when they make an ethical mistake, we have a different emotional reaction to it. And what I've learned by working with students is I get that, and working with faculty, I get that emotional reaction, and let's temper it down and realize that for most of the time, ethical mistakes are just mistakes in judgment, or they're mistakes in decision making, to David's field. And it's not always, and most of the time, it's not intentional, and it's not to cheat my way through. It's a last minute kind of thing. And so seeing students go through our after education program, seeing them learn, seeing them want to become part of our office and then become peer mentors themselves has just led to that, has built that mind frame that I have about the whole thing.
mhm, mhm. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, developing students' agency and giving them the opportunity to steer their own education
Mm,
is something that we've kind of lost track of in higher ed.
uh,
And I think that because higher ed was really built on a bedrock foundation of privilege, and you look at people who look like me, who were pretty much the only people allowed into higher ed for the first 100 or 200 years of it, some schools longer,
mm,
we haven't really entirely shed the notion that you're supposed to come in knowing how to do it already,
Mm.
and that any failures are failures of character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we are, some disciplines much more so than others, we're still trying to figure out what it means to educate people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
know, in the at the research university model, teaching is something you're forced to do and not something that people choose to do in a lot of cases. One of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons I opted out of that model is because I actually value the other part of it. And as it turns out, being a scholar of cognitive science to be able to then use it in the classroom has been a big win. I mean, that was the most liberating moment in my own teaching is when I realized that they weren't going to remember 90% of what I was teaching in that semester. And so the best thing I can do is give them that 10% and maybe make them want to read more about it later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not cynicism. That's how human memory works,
Yeah.
Right. Right.
right? So it's a matter of we can pretend something different, or we can actually teach to the humans we have in front of us.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And bringing together those threads of agency, like you say, empowerment and accountability, that those
Yeah.
could be, those don't have to be mutually exclusive or in conflict with each other, that there's a path and a connected way forward together.
Yeah.
That really,
Yep.
really
I
comes.
love that you say that, Greer, because you know the famous ChatGPT inclination to do it's not this, it's that. And I don't know how many times on LinkedIn I've seen it's not cheating, it's
Uh-huh.
using tools. And I'm like, it's both. It can be both. Do not, I've actually think I've said, do not steal students' moral or ethical agency from them by
Right.
pretending that they have no choice over this matter.
That's right.
They can choose when, if, how, and why to use these tools. And we should be helping them develop those skills, but to take their agency away from them to make that ethical mistake, and not hold them accountable to that, I think we're not doing the students any favors.
That's right. And potentially ourselves too. I think
Right.
about giving up our agency as educators and
Yeah.
that quote about saving the, what is it? Saving the pessimism for better times, right? That we're in it together and we owe it to ourselves and our students to be as optimistic and connected as we can possibly be. And
Hmm.
really love that. So, something else that you both have in common is your past leadership of the International Center for Academic Integrity,
Hmm.
as President Emerita and Emeritus, respectively. So, similar to the question about students, I would love it if you each could share a little bit about how being a part of that community, that organization specifically, has shaped your approach, perhaps over the years, and or maybe in particular with respect to the opposite of cheating.
Well, for me, it changed everything. I mean, there's no question. I remember the first conference I went to in Jacksonville. I was standing in line to check into the hotel, and I realized it was the first conference I'd ever been to where I didn't know a soul.
Mm,
You know, I've been going to conferences of the small group that did decision science, and so I knew most of the people my generation. And it didn't even take a day before we are sitting in the hotel bar at the end of the day with Tricia and Jim Lang and basically the entire rest of the board of directors. And it felt like home immediately.
mm,
And so I always took that with me through my own leadership journey, which is the most important thing about ICAI as an organization has always been the people and the just that feeling that you found your people.
mhm,
And
mhm.
no matter what else I ever did in the organization, I wanted to nurture that feeling.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
Trisha, what about you?
yeah, I think I agree, ditto, on that. And the driving of the fundamental values conversation, I
Mm,
think has been so critical from ICI because when I'm talking to students, um, when I say to them, do you want friends that are dishonest with you? Have you ever been disrespectful? Do you want colleagues who are not trustworthy? These are super easy questions to answer, right? And
mhm,
people feel it viscerally because everybody's been lied to, everybody's been disrespectful and irresponsible at times. And so it just it so resonates with people regardless of where they're from around the world. And we are the International Center for Academic Integrity, and we do have people join us from around the world. And it provides that common conversation, that common bonding.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about diversity, and we don't talk enough, I think, about similarities.
Mhm.
We are all human, and we're unique, of course, and our backgrounds make us unique.
I'm
And
not.
and we share some common human values that can bond us and help us understand each other. So I do appreciate that them coming up with the fundamental values in the first place, the revision that happened, and the continual driving of it. It's not all about values, certainly, but it's such a human approach to the conversation.
Hmm. Well, and again, coming back to this idea of what connects us, whether rather than what divides us.
Yeah.
It's a really nice benchmark, kind of
Hmm.
North Star to come back to.
Yeah.
So pivoting just a little bit, my next question for you both is a two-parter. And it's part one, what are the most common questions that you've gotten in all of those speaking engagements, 100 plus that you've had? And part two, is there anything that folks haven't commented on or asked about that you wish they would? Part two and a half, and would you like to answer that question if so? There's a
Well,
lot there.
yeah. I mean, one common question I'm sure David's gotten as well is what about online asynchronous classes?
Hmm.
How do we validate learning in those classes? And what I've been saying two things. One, I think we want to separate the modality of learning from the modality of assessment. Even in-person classes have online unsupervised asynchronous assessments, and they are
Mhm.
extremely vulnerable um, to corruption,
Mhm.
whether that's from a mistake or intentional corruption. Modality of learning is great. I think we should celebrate. People can learn wherever they want. They can learn in whatever way they want. And then have that tough conversation. Okay, so modality of learning versus modality of assessment, which might mean for online asynchronous learning, there has to be some supervised synchronous assessment at some point in the program. So that's the tough question, especially when it's from teachers who can't change the modality of assessment for their course because
Mhm.
their college or university tells them they may not require synchronous meetings for asynchronous courses.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a challenge. And then the second thing it brings up for us is we tend to put in conflict values that I don't think need to be in conflict. So
Mm.
in this case, access and integrity. People say, but
Mm.
what about access? But what about access? And frankly, we threw integrity out with the bathwater during the pandemic for access.
Sure. Of
And so I think we're smart enough to balance both. So Rushworth Kidder, who's one of the
course.
author we use in our ethics lab for our students after a violation, talks about we think we're in an ethical dilemma with access and integrity. We have to choose one or the other, but really it could be a trilemma where we could find a third solution to uphold both values. It might not be perfect, but I would say they're in tension and not in conflict. And so I think it's bringing up really good conversations around we can value access and tell students for your sake and for the sake of the integrity of our degree, we want to validate your learning. We want to make sure you're actually learning something. That's our responsibility to you. And so you're signed up for this, say, online asynchronous degree. Here's the three benchmarks, the milestone times where you're going to have to come in and demonstrate your learning to us. And as long as we tell students that up front, then I don't see a problem with that.
Sure. The transparency and the we're on the same team here
Yeah.
sensibility. Love
Hmm.
it.
And we also have an obligation to provide that access
Yes.
in creative ways.
Yes.
We
Mm.
need to get away from the notion that you have to come to your classroom, whatever that means, and take a test with your professor.
Yep.
Every one of those things is negotiable,
Yep.
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be a test. It doesn't have to be on your campus or in fact any campus.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be the assessments don't even have to be written by your instructor, right? You can have it. We could have it, assessment experts just the same way we have course designers, right?
Mhm.
That could
Mhm.
exist, and there's probably going to be people who are a lot better at it than those of us who do the teaching part well, but maybe not the assessment part as well.
Sure. So
So,
leaning into that expertise.
yeah,
Go
Mhm.
ahead.
which actually gets to the question I get a lot is where are we going as higher ed?
Yeah,
What's the future hold?
sure.
And of course, I have no idea, but that doesn't stop me from answering. Uh,
Sure.
and and so I say we're either going to adapt or be irrelevant.
Mhm.
And so those adaptations include a lot of the things that Trisha's talking about, finding that a third new way of balancing things that are no longer in balance.
Hmm.
So finding a new relationship between assessment and instruction, figuring out new modes of instruction, and by which I mostly mean calendars, but also
Yes.
delivery mechanisms that allow for learning at the pace that makes sense for each student and for each topic. Organic chemistry and French really probably have different learning curves. And
Mm.
so why do we treat them as if 15 weeks is or 12 weeks if you're
Or 10 if you were on the quarter system, just gotta
yeah,
say.
I actually love
Yep.
the quarter system because it's more flexible.
Mm.
The shorter the time frame, the more of them you can build up.
Mm.
That's my thinking. Of course, I haven't taught in quarters since again the 1900s. So that's the first question I get asked a lot is where are we going? And the other
Mm.
question I think both of us probably get asked a lot is something to the effect of how on earth do you expect us to do all this?
Yes.
Where
Mm.
are we going to find the time and resources?
Hmm.
And we said it in the book a few times, but we really could have hit it harder. And in fact, this might even be the next book, which is what does higher ed as a set of institutions have to do to make these changes by faculty, course designers, and students possible?
Yep.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
no one could be expected to do all the things we suggested in the book, but it's intended to be a menu, not a list of requirements. And so I
Hmm.
always encourage people to just start with what sings to them or what feels like it can fit into their instruction. Don't
Hmm.
do anything that doesn't feel sensible or authentic or possible.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and also expect some of this stuff to fail miserably, right? Because
Sure.
nothing complicated or worth doing works the first time.
That's right.
Right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, I can tell stories of my failures of specification grading. Oh, it was a complete wipeout. Uh, but it's okay. I mean, the
Yeah,
students mostly learned. They were annoyed at me, and rightfully so. But we all got something from that class, and so the next time it got better.
Hmm.
sure.
But
And that,
it was still better than what I had before.
well, and that starting somewhere is what's
Hmm.
important, right? We don't have to finish the work, but we shouldn't or can't
We're not
abandon
free
it
to
quite
refrain
yet.
from it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You knew where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the book, I think.
I think it is. Yeah, you're right. So you partially anticipated my second to last question, David, in terms of what's next. But I'll ask it formally because it allows me to quote from one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite poems by Charles Bukowski that goes, "I am on the next page, the next book." So what's next for each of you after Opposite of Cheating, book or otherwise?
Well, I actually have a Cambridge University Press Elements coming out in the generative ed and higher and education series. It's
Mm.
with Mary Davis from
Oh,
England, another
wonderful.
ICI
An
board member.
ICAI colleague, yes.
Yes, and Zenith Khan from UAE, the University of Wollongong in Dubai.
Yes.
And we are again tackling generative AI and academic integrity, but very different approach from what David and I did. So we do a chapter on what is academic integrity and to kind of give people the history of the research and that. Then we talk about the historical technological disruptions to academic integrity since
Mm.
the printing press. Then
Mhm.
we do a fictional story of what universities might look like in 2045. It's pretty dystopian,
Oof.
based on, and then we do an analysis chapter to tell people why we think that's a possible future. And then we get into practical questions for now to avoid that future. So practical questions for now for policy and procedures, for teaching, learning, and assessment, and for embedding ethics, whether that's artificial intelligence ethics or just ethical decision making into our curriculum, and as a really important turn that colleges and universities have to make that we've been avoiding doing. So that is coming out at some point in the new year, or this year. We're already in the new year.
This is
Um,
the new year.
this is the new year, so that's coming out
This
some
is the
point.
last page.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
of this book, not the next book.
I'm with David. I
Exactly.
would love to write the opposite of cheating, what leaders, or what educational system needs to change to make possible what we talk about in the book. Yeah.
And
Institutional ability.
I
Yep.
think a companion piece that actually talks to those folks who we've been talking to, and
Mm,
because a lot of people have made some really creative and interesting changes to their courses on the basis of this book and just the zeitgeist. It's not just
Yeah.
us. And I'd
mhm,
love to come back and we platform the people who've been doing this work for a while. I'd like to platform the people who just started down this journey and
uh-huh.
give them some space to show us this really interesting teaching and assessment design that's
Mm,
emerging
Yeah.
because things are changing so fast we can't just keep talking to the same people.
mhm,
Mm.
mhm, mhm.
But that's more of a wish than an actual thing. In terms of work, I think I don't know, but it looks like Jason Stevens, yet another one of our colleagues, and I are going to write something together for the first time. We've co-authored together many times, but always in groups, and
Yeah.
we've never worked on anything just the two of us. And I've known Jason again 20 years, and
Mhm.
so it'll be really nice to get a chance to work with him on something in particular. And then basically we've got what we call the English speaking world project, where we're trying to collect data from students using the McCabe survey, from as many folks as we can, starting with those who speak English as part of their schooling and then going from there. So if you're listening from India, largest English speaking country in the world, feel free to email me. I would really love to hear about your data.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Final question. I'm going to quote from another famous misanthrope, Gene Simmons of
Mm.
KISS, who once told the NPR anchor Terry Gross that, quote, life is too short to have anything but delusional notions about yourself. And to bring us home, to wrap up this episode, I'd love if each of you could share a piece of advice for folks who care about academic integrity. It could be personal, professional, some of those early adopter people who are in the fold, some of those more
Mhm.
recent adopters, just anyone you wish. What's a piece of advice you would give to those of us who care?
I see Tricia thinking, so I've got a quick
Mhm.
and easy one, which is come join us at ICAI. It's an incredible group of people, and it's absolutely jumpstarts my thinking about academic integrity every year to come to
Mm,
the conference or go to webinars or any of those activities that ICAI, that's academicintegrity.org, um, provides. And the current board and active members are doing an amazing job, and you should come join us. It's great.
Mhm.
totally agree.
Ditto. And people that have integrity aren't perfect. They make mistakes, but what differentiates them from other folks is that they take accountability for those mistakes and they choose to learn and grow from them. And so if we look at as teachers all the mistakes we've made, David was talking about, trial and error in doing specs grading, all the mistakes we might make and how we've responded to cheating in the past. Just use it as an opportunity for learning and growth, reflect on it, and decide to do something different. And for students who are listening, you too, right? If you make a
Mhm,
mistake, just own up to it and take accountability and decide how am I going to grow forward from this?
mhm. I love that it's never too late. It's always the right time
Mhm.
to practice integrity.
The
Mhm.
best time to start practicing integrity is yesterday. The next best time is today.
I will take next best. That will absolutely work for me. Thank you both. That it has been such a pleasure to drive this conversation and once again to learn from you all as I do anytime we're in contact.
Thank you, Greer. Really appreciate
Thank you,
you
Greer.
stepping into the hostess seat.